Welcome back to the Awkward Sports Podcast. I'm Harrison. That is my good friend Josh over there. And today we are going to be talking about the Final Four. And Harrison, we like to talk obviously about all these different sports. And obviously the Final Four is such a big deal. But I wanted to start here with the women's side of the Final Four because to me, this side of the field is just so much more fascinating when you break it all down. You have a unbeaten South Carolina team, which is now the new gold standard in the women's game. For years, it was Connecticut with Gino Ariema. They had a stretch where they won 4 consecutive titles, like over 130 something games in a row. They were the story. Now it's South Carolina with head coach Dawn Staley. She has a great story as well. But if you look at the teams that are left standing, North Carolina State, a 3 seed. You have Iowa with Caitlin Clark, and we all know about how stellar Caitlin Clark is as a player. And then, of course, UConn, another 3 seed with Paige Beckers, again, the blue blood being back in the Final Four. This year, maybe more of a surprise than other years. Obviously, not to me. I had them in my Final Four. I'm going to brag on myself a little bit here. But when you look at just the way this field is shaped up, a lot of great stories surrounding a lot of key players, especially on the women's side. One of the reasons why the women's side of the Final Four of March Madness this year was so stellar was there are so many stars. You look at Hannah Hidalgo from Notre Dame, Cameron Brink from Stanford. You look at Angel Reese from LSU, who's made a huge brand of herself. You have Caitlin Clark, who was first team, along with the players that I mentioned with Hidalgo and Brink. And then, of course, Paige Beckers of UConn being there. And, of course, in the Elite Eight, you had USC with Juju Watkins. Have to throw her in there for the stellar freshman season that she had as well. But you have, to me, Harrison, the more fascinating matchup of these two is going to be Iowa versus UConn. You have like the hype centering into this game. Caitlin Clark coming off of one of her most incredible wins of her career, getting that revenge against LSU. And she came out and said, UConn was her dream school. Like many girls that want to play basketball, Caitlin Clark said UConn was her dream school, but she wasn't looked at by UConn. She was overlooked. So you have that side of the story, right? So you have those people that are wrapping their arms around Caitlin Clark, how great she is, embracing the fact that she was overlooked. On the other side of this matchup, with UConn, you have a girl named Paige Beckers, who, if you followed college basketball more than just this season, she was a story where she came through high school and she was that star player that everyone knew. She was the best player coming out. She got offers from UConn. She had like the highest NIL deal for the women's basketball sport for college athletics. It was her. And one of the things that she did that I haven't forgotten was when she got one of her first NIL checks, she spent it on her teammates, somebody that was all about the team. Fast forward to now, she has dealt with number of injuries and kind of been cast off of the spotlight as we've now seen players like Caitlin Clark and Juju Watkins emerge. But she has still been a very talented player, obviously making first team. Gino Ariema, just a week ago, made the comment that he believes that she's the best player in the women's game. And why wouldn't he? Because she has been at that level as long as she has been on the court. And now the fact that she is back here in the Final Four, she was so emotional after that Elite Eight win, giving glory to God, just thanking him for all the blessings that she has. And now she's healthy and they're back in the Final Four. And to me, my message to her would be to the diehard fans of women's basketball. Paige Beckers, we have not forgotten about you. You are just as much of a star as some of these other players like Caitlin Clark and Juju Watkins are, even though other people might have overlooked you in that team. So that is a really cool story about UConn getting there, getting back to the Final Four. That'll be a great game. So I wanted to start there with the women's game. Obviously, in my bracket, I had South Carolina versus UConn in the final. So I do have UConn beating Iowa. But I will say, when you look at Iowa's team and you look at the players Caitlin Clark has around her, they have started to step up. You have Hannah Stolke, who started to play well as the tournaments progressed, and especially Kate Martin, who had her season high in points in the Elite Eight game, which helped Iowa get revenge on LSU. Obviously, For those that don't know much about the revenge, the backstory there was the two teams, LSU and Iowa, played in the national championship last year. Caitlin Clark in the Final Four versus Louisville did the John Cena "you can't see me" face, looked over to her bench, to Louisville's bench. Then when LSU won in the championship, Angel Reese did the same thing, except the game was kind of over with, so Caitlin Clark couldn't really respond. And now we got the rematch, and that was all said and done. And one other thing I wanted to touch on from that game, the last point I'm going to make here on that particular game, the Iowa LSU rematch, it was the most viewed women's basketball game we have ever seen. It's great for the sport. It had more views than like all the conference football championships. It had more views. There was a whole like laundry list that it topped. It had like 12.3 million viewers on average, which was just spectacular. So big shout out there to the women's game. Harrison, I'm excited for these two matchups. And I think we're going to have a great Final Four here in this upcoming weekend, especially on the women's side.
Absolutely. Like when you think about the fact that you get a historic team, especially I just want to look at the Iowa versus UConn perspective, just that in a sense of a revenge game, if you're from Caitlin Clark's perspective, just the idea that, being overlooked and then you get that last laugh in your final year of eligibility. That's why I have Iowa going on to the championship over UConn. I think there's that extra chip on your shoulder. Sometimes they say keep your have short-term memory. I believe sometimes long-term memory really helps you out in some of these instances. You just want to really stick it to somebody one last time on the court before you walk off to become the ultimate face of the WNBA, which is what I'm imagining Clark is going to do.
Yeah, and it should be noted that Caitlin Clark also, which I thought with this story out of left field was really funny to me. But props to Ice Cube and the Big Three. The Big Three, for those who don't know about the Big Three, it's a basketball league, a 3-on-3 league. It's a men's league. It's like of retired basketball players that still want to play half court ball for fun. You see a lot of former NBA players in it. They made a $5 million offer to Caitlin Clark to join that league. I thought that was really cool of the Big Three to do that. I don't think she's going to go that route, even though that is a good amount of money, especially if you look at the amount of money that they usually make on the women's side. But it was fascinating. You see Clark, she's going to go to the WNBA. Obviously, we find out about Angel Reese, later today, because that's the deadline. If she wants to opt in to her final year, if she wants to use that COVID year of eligibility for the next season. And it's kind of a debate, because NIL, you get a lot there, and WNBA obviously doesn't pay like the NBA does. So that's why on that side, it's always like a question mark of what these players are going to do. But you look at, we talked about, long-term memory, Caitlin Clark being able to come back. It kind of had like, coming up to that game, it kind of had like that Last Dance Jordan feel to it, where it's like, we're going to get my revenge. We're going to get our revenge. Kind of like when the Bulls lost to the Magic in the Eastern Conference Finals and then rematched them the next year. And there was no doubt who was going to win that series. Jordan was coming back for revenge, and they were able to win and go on and win an NBA championship. But it kind of feels a lot like that with Iowa. And again, you look at those teams. Obviously, so much drama created around certain matchups and venues, and obviously, I wanted to touch on LSU just a little bit closer here because I know they're still not playing anymore, but they've also gotten a lot of hate for a number of different things. A lot of it to me is unwarranted. Some of it to me, I mean, it really depends. Like there's people that bring politics into all of it, and there's obviously these stories circling Kim Mulkey and from different articles from notable news sources that she is already shooting down that we haven't even read yet. But there's obviously been a lot of drama circling that team, and even including Angel Reese from last season. My biggest thing is with Angel Reese, they lost and she handled it with class. And I just wanted to shout that out for people that are bringing down hate on the LSU side of things. They lost, she handled it with class. The thing from last year that was kind of rubbed me the wrong way was they were talking after the game was over. Like, you're going to talk like the greats do. You got to talk when it's still up in the air for both. But she handled the loss with class. Caitlin Clark, I feel like, handled the win with the class. So I think at the end of the day, and they're all friends. They've all said it a number of times. It's just great that you can step outside of those lines, away from the basketball court, and still be pals with these people. And then when you get on the court, you mean business. So again, all these great storylines around all these different teams with the women's side. And that to me is what makes the women's side this year the more fascinating spectacle of this tournament. I mean, we're going to get to the men's side here in a second, Harrison. Um, but this women's side it's been so stellar. I have never enjoyed women's basketball more than I have right now.
No, neither have I. And going back just because you mentioned the big three contract, wouldn't it be a fun scenario after this? Maybe she takes it for a couple of years, gets to really build her brand a little bit more against some NBA legends, like retired guys, and then just goes to the WNBA. Why not hit all your bases? Take the 5 million for a few years and then hop to the WNBA and then build that brand from there. Make it
Yeah,
like just a whole career tour. Why
yeah,
not?
yeah. It's a great question that you bring up too, because again, we talked about it. The money is not necessarily the most in the WNBA. I get like that's theoretically the highest level of performance basketball for women's basketball. The WNBA is that, and you've seen a lot of legends come through there. And at the end of the day, I mean, that is a fascinating decision. I think one thing that helps the WNBA here, and this is kind of a weird one, but the Indiana Fever have the number one overall pick in the WNBA draft. And Caitlin Clark is, around, she's a Midwest girl. She's
Yeah,
from
she's at Iowa.
Indiana's right there, number one. So it's not too far away from home for her. I think that's something that's kind of appealing there. Whereas, the big three's got, teams. And the big three is like a traveling league where it's like you don't have like this city has a big three team. You have like 10 or 12 teams and the league moves. Like the league will be in Vegas one week and then the league will be in Atlanta the next week. Like they don't
Yeah, it's
have.
kind of what that Premier Lacrosse League kind of does, where like, yeah, there's different teams. They don't really represent anywhere in particular.
Yeah, I mean, they might. I mean, I gotta do my deep dive on the lacrosse on the lacrosse side of things for me to
Just like
confirm.
that PLL, I think it's called the Premier Lacrosse League. And it's like
Maybe.
that's their brands. They're just all over the place. Someone's probably going to hear me say that and then go in the comments and go, actually. But that's how I recall it correctly.
But yeah, I mean, maybe they do. And again, one last note, and this is about the Final Four as a whole. I mean, if you're an alum or a student at University of Connecticut or at North Carolina State, you're excited because not only your women's teams are in the Final Four, but your men's teams are as well. North Carolina State, obviously being a team. Now that we're segueing over here, I'm going to segue over to the men's side of things. DJ Burns, he had a meet and greet yesterday, and he posted on social, and there were people out the door. There was a line like imagine a new ride opening up at Disney World, and like it's the first day, and you see the line wrapped. That was basically what it was for DJ Burns at this like restaurant he was doing a meet and greet at yesterday. It's so cool to see, like how much he is kind of blossomed as a player. And I'm going to be 100% honest with you, Harrison. I did not know who DJ Burns was like 3 weeks ago. I had no clue. And I'm watching him in this Elite Eight game against Duke, and I am thinking to myself, man, this guy makes low post basketball look cool again. I mean, he reminds me of Zach Randolph, a former NBA player that I liked watching growing up. He played with the Portland Trailblazers for a little bit. The Memphis Grizzlies is the team he's most known for, I would say. He was a big bodied player that was physical, that could overpower you with his size and his strength, but he had like the finesse of a guard when he had like with his shooting touch. It was just great. Not to say he could shoot from like 30 feet, but in traffic, the soft arcing shot that he's got, DJ Burns has that. And I'm just watching him against Duke, and it's like nobody can stop this man. I think a possibility of NC State, granted, they're going to have to get through a juggernaut of a UConn team, but them against DJ Burns and possibly against a Zach Edey, that would be something exciting to see.
Look, sometimes you have to remind people that it's not all about shooting threes. And because everyone's whole mindset is around the arc, you get one guy who's big enough to just push through and just knock some fadeaways in, you're gonna make them eat their lunch because it's all like you mentioned, it's a lost starts. Just those midfield shots, even just being able to push your way into the paint. And for the record, this guy, I didn't know this guy was either until literally a few days ago when Josh here sent me a video about at 1 a.m. and said, "Hey, you gotta see this guy." And it was kind of refreshing to see because it was like watching basketball from the mid 2000s when a lot of people would have argued it was more interesting. There were more fundamentals to it. Maybe the Charlotte Hornets should keep an eye on this guy because, hey, you're already in North Carolina, right? Just have him come across after the NBA draft, pick him up in the second round, probably because they don't look, he's probably going to be overlooked in the NBA draft anyway. Take him in the second round and make everybody pay.
Yeah, and hey, if he for whatever reason has another year of eligibility, I'd love to see him back in the college game again next year. But I do want to correct myself here. They're actually North Carolina State is actually playing Purdue in the Final Four, so they don't have to go through UConn to get there. So Zach Edey
Well,
versus
they
DJ
can. They have
Burns
to do it. They might have to win it.
is a matchup. Yeah, but yeah, Zach Edey, DJ Burns, that is a matchup we are going to get to see, which is going to be a whole bunch of fun. Obviously Zach Edey being a player who has been a college legend for a number of years here at Purdue, and he's going to go to the NBA after this year. A lot of people are trying to boost his draft stock, from number of people around the Purdue program, especially uh, big names around college basketball. Dan Hurley spoke earlier this week about Zach Edey and basically saying that if he doesn't go in the lottery, there is something wrong with the way the NBA is playing their game of basketball. If Zach Edey is not a lottery pick, it was a very bold quote, which he was sticking up for. UConn coach is sticking up for a Purdue player there. Obviously, they could possibly meet here on a collision course in the final. A lot of these UConn and Purdue have been widely looked at as the two best teams on the men's side this year. Very well possible matchup there. But I want to talk about Purdue a little bit more. Purdue, obviously
Revenge
last year,
tour.
and I like to call them. I love to call Purdue. I like to call them Purdue because Purdue not pick them. If you are filling out a bracket, just stay away from that team. Well, there was another team that was a lot like that too. Virginia. Virginia in 2018 lost to a 16 seed. That was University of Maryland at Baltimore County, the UMBC Retrievers. The next year, they went on and won the national championship. Now, mind you, in that first round game the following year, after they lost the first round, they almost lost again, but they were able to put together a comeback, win that game, survive in advance. Shout out NC State, survive in advance, and then went all the way and win the national championship. Purdue is trying to do the same thing. They are trying to copy the revenge tour that Virginia had in their own way. Last year in 2023, Purdue loses in the first round to Fairleigh Dickinson. And now here they are at the Final Four with an 11 seed as their matchup. They got a chance to get to the championship game. And when you're 40 minutes away, the possibility of being 40 minutes away from a title game or even a championship, they could very well execute the same thing. A lot of people had them winning the bracket last year. They came up short. This year, they may surprise a lot of the doubters, myself included.
Yeah, look, I mean, this is going to be a really fun potential final when you think about it. You have the team that could be the first to repeat, which is UConn, since the Florida Gators in 06 and 07. Then you have the revenge tour with Purdue. I think that's by far going to be the most viewed finals matchup. Look, I mean, NC State would be fun. It would be nice to see them pull a survive in advance type of what's the word I'm looking for? And I mean, actually, it would be fitting if they got as far as they did because they're already the lowest seed to ever win it. And then they do it again as a lower seed. I believe they were an eighth seed when they survived in advance back in 84.
Maybe in 83, I think they were a sixth seed, but I'm not entirely sure there. So you can keep talking, but I think, yeah, it might have been, I think they were a sixth seed. 1983 NC State team with, of course, Jim Valvano, the late Jim Valvano, who was an inspirational coach to so many. And a lot of people were, paying, homage this week to, him and his family, leaving things like the Pack is back, Wolf Pack, NC State Wolf Pack is back. And it's a cool story to see because it goes all the way back for this year's NC State team to the ACC tournament where they needed a 3 just to force overtime in the semifinal game, just to stay alive in the conference tournament. If they lose that game, they're not even making it to the tournament. And then you have Duke, on Twitter, who very funny how he came all the way full circle, trolling NC State with a infamous SpongeBob meme where it's Squidward in the Krusty Krab pointing
Oh,
down with a siren going, and it was like NIT, and then they go all the way, face Duke in the Elite Eight, and beat them.
well, that's called foreshadowing in cinema. Really make that again, long-term memory. NC State did not forget that meme, and they made them pay in the Elite Eight. They also made my bracket pay. I mean, oh my God, we're both down to 1, by the way. We of course we picked UConn because they're not insane to be in the Final Four. I had Duke in my Final Four. Oh well. NC State said haha. Kansas, no. UNC, well, Bama says ha. But anyway, we've digressed quite a bit. Back to Purdue. I'm gonna give them full credit. I did not have them in the championship. I went with the don't mindset team that is always good in the regular season, but doesn't ever get past the Sweet 16. But then I thought about like, yeah, this is a Virginia 2019 situation. I mean, they could totally end up being a Gonzaga type deal too from a couple of years ago where you're absolutely, I mean, they're not undefeated to preface this, but you seem like a team of destiny, which I mean, that could also be UConn as well. You can argue both sides. Actually, that's more of an argument for UConn. Let me rephrase that. UConn seems like the team of destiny. Then you run to the revenge team, which would be the Baylor equivalent in this instance, and you get steamrolled. Purdue might actually have a shot because they got the chip on their shoulder from last year, where UConn is the reigning champion that's kind of cruised all the way to the end so far.
Yeah,
That's kind of when you sometimes hit your roadblock is you hit that big opponent and bye.
Yeah, no, they've cruised. They've cruised. And I think my biggest comparison for UConn, and I'm pivoting to UConn here as basketball team this year, isn't even another basketball team. They remind me of Georgia football right now. They're just obliterating everybody in their path. It feels like they're playing at a different level than every program. So it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, I picked them to win because I just don't see anybody stopping them. But again, it's hard to go back to back in March Madness. Florida did it back in 06 and 07. And before that, it was Duke. And I believe it was either 91 92. I think it was 91 92. I think those were the years that Duke did. And to answer the 83 NC State thing, they were a 6 seed. But the point is, on this back to back thing, the last time it happened, the field wasn't even 68 teams. It was 64 teams. They hadn't had the first 4 yet. They had, so it's never happened in the most recent format, which could now change down the road. We've heard about rumors of possible expansion. I think it's fine the way it is.
Yeah, let's just make it 120 teams. Let's just add a whole new round. Forget the NIT. Let's have it where the NIT is a bunch of losing records playing on a Tuesday nights.
Yeah, and I mean, it's something. And one thing I will say about the NIT, I know we're kind of going all over the map here, hitting on all these different things.
Can't wait for Vanderbilt versus Evansville in the NIT championship. I mean, we could have got some decent schools, but they're in the round of 84 trying to make it in the March Madness.
I'll say this. I'm not one because on my philosophy on the bubble teams are like, if you're in, you're in. Congratulations, you got in. If you didn't make it, you're on the bubble. You should have won more games. I was a little disappointed that Indiana State, Larry Bird's alma mater, did not get in the tournament this year. They were 32-6. I would not have been able to refrain from moving them to my Sweet 16. If they were in the bracket, I don't care what seed they would have been. I would have moved them far because I think they would have gone for a run.
By the way, I just did the math because I don't know how to just do ×2. But if you take the 64, it becomes 128. You can still do a first 4 with 120, but with 100 and 32. Apparently, I can't do basic math. I'm a journalist. I write, I report numbers. Other people tell me. Like, can you imagine like the first four and you're just like the 134th team in or second or whatever it is?
It's something that we
That's just
can.
why like 64 is already a lot.
64 to me is the ideal. Like 68 to me is too many. Like, what's the point
Yeah,
of the
why
first?
is there like what's the whole point of a play-in? These are teams that are gonna be out in the first round.
But like I get it. Like you have the outlier like UCLA a couple of years ago, right? They were a first four team and they made it all the way to the final four. I get it, but it's like
That's also UCLA.
yeah, 64 is enough. Like 64 is
Also,
enough. Like,
you said UCLA. That's kind of like a blue blood school going on a run. That's not,
yeah,
Oral Roberts just showing up and mopping the floor with everybody.
yeah.
I think
Speaking of
that's a bit of a different example too.
yeah, no, but it was weird. I mean, UCLA was 11, but yeah, again, 64 is fine. Back to back's hard. UConn's trying to do it. Purdue's trying to do the revenge. Four great teams in the final four. I mean, it's gonna be a good one. I am personally, obviously as a Gator, I don't want to see UConn take the mantle from the Florida Gators. I want Florida to be the last to go back to back until I
Enjoy it
die.
while you can, though,
But,
just
well,
in case. Just enjoy it.
yeah, I'm on the DJ Burns train. I want to see how far this team can go. Purdue is a fun story, but I don't want the memes to quite go away. I think if they win, they enter the Baylor and Virginia category where it's like, I don't trust them, but hey, they've won a title. Both Baylor and Virginia can say that. And then Arizona is left in that category by themselves, which I will never touch with a 10-foot pole in any bracket I ever do. If you're watching out here and you're looking to fill out a bracket for next year, just so you know, you have been warned. I've told everybody else, don't pick Arizona. Just do not pick
No,
them.
I had them out like in the round of 32 or something. Now, because they said that, watch them go on some revenge tour
Watch
next
them.
year.
I would be really shocked if they did. It would be,
Oh, of
but
course we would be. We were all shocked that Purdue's doing what they're doing now.
yeah, it's
Now, you
it's
know what that means? You know what this means? Colorado has spoken a Florida Gators tear next season to the Final Four. Want to know what's my proof of that? March Madness is insane. And you know what? You can't prove that's wrong because we got NC State in the Final Four.
we do. And there is one team we have been leaving out here. We've talked about like the Final Four teams on the women's side, and we talked about three of the Final Four teams on the men's side: UConn, Purdue, NC State. Great stories. We got to talk a little bit here about Alabama because they're in the Final Four. And Harrison, as a Gator fan, I am actually frustrated to no end because Florida not only beat this team in March twice, or in a week leading up to the tournament twice, they beat them. They dropped over 200 points in two contests. I mean, it wasn't even close. Florida obliterated this team. And I'm not going to lie to you, Harrison. I'm a little salty. I'm a little bitter. Alabama kind of got a nice draw. They got a nice draw from the bracket, and they ended up playing James Madison and then Grand Canyon. And then they got a down game from North Carolina. And then then there was the upset in the Elite Eight where they played, oh man, who did they just beat to get to the Final Four? It was, Clemson. They played 6 seed Clemson instead
Yeah,
of,
this isn't football. Playing Clemson and basketball is a
yeah.
little bit different.
And they're a good team. Props to Clemson, but this isn't college football. Alabama and Clemson playing for a Final Four. What's going on? So the point is, they kind of got a nice draw there, and now they've wound up in the Final Four. I fully expect that game to be an utter beatdown. I think Alabama is going to get steamrolled. I think UConn's closest margin of victory is like more than 15 points, as much or 13 or 15, something around there. I
Is
mean,
that a lot?
that's like that's the smallest margin of victory they have. They've been beating
I'm
teams
being
by
sarcastic. I'm asking, is that a lot to win by?
it's crazy. And like they've been beating everybody by 30. I think they'll beat Bama by at least 20. I think they will. I think it'll be another steamroll affair for UConn. But hey, Bama is still here. And I didn't think Bama would be here. So shout out to Mark Sears and Nate Oates, the coach at Alabama, the job that they've done. Oh, getting the hand that they've been dealt, but also taking advantage of it, winning those games. They easily could have been bounced earlier as well. That's still a nice win against a good North Carolina team that many people had not only going to the Final Four, but maybe winning the bracket as well. So that was a big win for Alabama. They've made their first Final Four in program history. Obviously, a lot of people expected them to do that last year, being the number one overall seed, and the expectations then fell short. this year they're kind of having a little bit of a revenge year.
Yeah. Okay. Well, UConn might want to be on watch. I just want to say, Gator bias aside, good for Bama. Once in a while, you just gotta tip the cap and say, you guys are having a good run. I respect it. Maybe the fact that the Gators beat them a few times, especially in the SEC tournament, definitely helps ease that and make it a little bit easier of a pill to swallow. It's also not football for me, so it doesn't bother me as much either. Like if this was in football, we'd be losing our minds right now. Let's be real. But you know what? Still, congrats to Bama. If they knock out UConn and end up in the championship, you can always pull the isn't the SEC so great at everything card?
It's so funny. People were waiting to pile on the SEC. They had a bad first round. Like they're like the third. They're the either the second or third best conference in basketball this season. You can say the Big 12, but I'm looking at the field and who's left, Harrison. I don't see any Big 12 teams in the Final Four. Do you see any
Oh, I
12
see
teams
an
in the Final Four?
ACC. I see
Yeah.
a Big East.
Big East is the other one.
SEC because of Bama.
Yeah, and I'd say Big East is the other one. And if you want, I mean, the ACC usually is. The ACC had more of a down year, but then they still ended up getting one. North Carolina
Well,
State,
actually, Purdue.
a Big Ten for Purdue,
Yeah.
and Purdue is a Purdue, and the Big Ten is a that's another conference that is. I mean, we talk about Purdue trying to win one, right? And how long it's been since they've been to a Final Four. Think about the Big Ten as a conference. The last time they have won a national title is the year 2000. Michigan State over Florida in that game. So the Big
Oh,
Ten.
right. That was Billy Donovan's first trip to the championship.
Yep, and that was the last time the Big Ten has won a national championship. So they're trying to exercise these Final Four demons as well. The conference as a whole, a conference that many people pick many years, and they always seem to let down. So it'll be fascinating to see if which of these four teams comes out on top on the men's side. Obviously, the women's side is going to be great as well. I think Harrison, this is going to be two stellar Final Fours we have upcoming this week.
Dude, I'm ready for it. And we'll be right back here next week, ready to talk about it.
Absolutely. And obviously, the Final Four is coming up. I'm as pumped about it as just about everybody else. Make sure you tune in. I am, of course, Harrison Smadvitz, and that is Josh Kapke.
Yes, I am Cape K.
And we will see you
Now I'm kidding. I have to go by Cap.
next time.